Colette Reyes had everything: a strong faith, an admirable education with a degree in chemical engineering, and a seemingly perfect life with her husband, Arthur. To outsiders, they embodied the American dream: a stable family, a happy home, and nearly 22 years of a solid marriage. But behind closed doors, that dream had turned into a nightmare. A fatal gunshot ended it all. Colette never denied pulling the trigger. "I killed him," she admitted. But the question remained: was she truly a victim trapped in a hellish marriage, or was she the real monster? As the investigation slowly unraveled the truth, it threatened to expose a marriage built on something far darker than love. Arlington, Texas, the night of November 22, 2009, 9:30 p.m. The 911 dispatcher received a frantic call. "My dad's been shot. He's bleeding. Please help." On the other end of the line was Gabrielle Reyes, a 17-year-old high school student. Her voice cracked with sheer terror. Just minutes earlier, she had rushed into the garage and was met with a horrifying scene. Her father, Arthur Reyes, 45 years old, lay collapsed on the cold concrete floor, blood pooling around him. Gabrielle hadn't witnessed the shooting itself, but she had arrived just in time to see its devastating aftermath. Panicked, she ran to a friend's house for help. As Gabrielle completely broke down, her friend's mother grabbed the phone and continued the call with the police. But what was even more terrifying was that the shooter was still inside the house. Colette Reyes, Gabrielle's mother, Arthur's wife, a 50-year-old woman with a vacant stare and the gun still in her hand. "Her mother is crazy." That chilling statement was only the beginning of a horrifying truth waiting to be revealed. What secrets had driven Colette to this point? Was this the act of a desperate woman, or a plan long in the making? Born in 1959 in Haiti, a sun-drenched Caribbean land, Colette Nicholas was once a joyful child growing up in a devout Christian family. When she was just 12, her life took a drastic turn when her mother decided to immigrate to the United States with her children, leaving their father behind. To Colette, America was the land of endless opportunities. A promising future awaited her. After graduating from high school, she pursued her studies at the New York Polytechnic Institute. It was there that she met Arthur Reyes, the man who would change her life forever. Arthur was born in New York, but also had Caribbean roots. He was 5 years younger than Colette and studied engineering. Their meeting during a Bible study session quickly brought them together. Colette was drawn to Arthur's calm and caring nature, and by 1988, they were engaged. He always carried a Bible with him. "My whole family thought he was a good, respectable man." After their wedding, they moved to California for Arthur to continue his education. At the time, Arthur was 24 and pursuing a master's degree, while Colette, at 29, became the primary financial provider, working in a research laboratory. She didn't hesitate to take on 2 jobs at once to support her husband's academic dreams. Before long, they welcomed 2 daughters, Naomi in 1989 and Gabrielle in 1991. Arthur seemed like the perfect husband, loving, devoted to his family. When he completed his master's degree, Colette encouraged him to go even further, and eventually, Arthur earned a PhD in software engineering. Their life seemed to be reaching the pinnacle of success when Arthur landed a job at the University of Texas. But then, at the age of 40, as their daughters were growing up, Colette started thinking about her own career. She enrolled in a nursing program, hoping to rediscover herself. Yet before that dream could take shape, a dark turning point struck. A sudden loss of faith, inexplicable changes. Everything would soon spiral into a storm of crisis that no one could have foreseen. The early years in Arlington, the Reyes family seemed to be enjoying a stable life. But then the change began, not from Colette, but from Arthur. The man who had spent his youth pursuing education, after many years of self-study, came to a conclusion that turned everything upside down. God was just a joke. This realization transformed Arthur into a completely different person. With the enthusiasm of a newly converted skeptic, he openly mocked faith, especially his wife's beliefs. Colette, who had lived her whole life devoted to religion, could not accept the reality that her husband, after 15 years of marriage, had turned his back on all the values she cherished. But the worst part was not just Arthur's change in belief, but the way he continuously tried to force Colette to abandon her religion. At the same time, the distance between Colette and her daughters grew larger. She imposed strict rules, just like her mother had done in Haiti. But to Naomi and Gabrielle, those rules were too outdated, too harsh. Especially Naomi, she couldn't stand her mother's conservative upbringing. Family tension reached its peak when Arthur made an unthinkable move. When Naomi had just turned 17, he moved her out of the house and rented an apartment for her completely against Colette's wishes. Their marriage, once an American dream, had now become a battlefield. Arthur and Colette argued endlessly about raising Gabrielle, about rules, about everything they once believed was right. And then, just a month after Naomi moved out, the storm that had been simmering for years finally exploded into a deadly tragedy. Sunday, November 22, 2009, the Emergency Dispatch Center in Arlington, Texas, received a frantic call. On the other end of the line was a trembling teenage girl, her voice breaking with fear. My dad has been shot. He's lying in the garage. There's blood everywhere." The caller was Gabrielle Reyes, 17 years old. In her panic, she handed the phone to her friend's mother so she could explain more clearly to the dispatcher. And what made the police rush to the scene immediately? Gabrielle stated that the shooter was none other than her own mother, Colette Reyes. When Arlington police arrived, they saw Colette, 50 years old, hurrying out the door with her sister and brother-in-law. She was unarmed, but since her daughter had just accused her of shooting her husband, the police couldn't let her go. They immediately handcuffed Colette and put her in the patrol car. Inside the house, a horrifying scene awaited the police. Arthur Reyes, 45 years old, lay motionless on the garage floor, blood spreading across the cold concrete. A Glock 9mm pistol was found nearby. But what confused investigators was that there were no signs of struggle, no clues indicating that Arthur had intended to attack his wife. The pieces of the puzzle gradually came together when police spoke to Colette's sister. According to her, Gabrielle was not the only one who had recently moved out. In October, after nearly 22 years of marriage, Arthur had also moved out. He rented an apartment near the University of Texas at Arlington and was living there with his daughter. The couple was in the process of separation, and this had left Colette devastated. On that fateful night, Arthur had returned home to collect some belongings still left in the garage. When he saw his wife, Colette approached and started a conversation. But soon, things escalated. Colette's sister recounted that Arthur had said some very harsh words to his wife, and then bang! A gunshot shattered the night. Colette's sister ran into the garage, only to witness a haunting scene. Arthur collapsed on the floor, Colette standing right over him. She simply said one cold sentence, "I shot him," but Colette insisted she had no other choice. She claimed that Arthur also had a gun. However, police only found one Glock 9mm in the garage, the only weapon present, and it did not belong to Arthur. In the interrogation room, as the police prepared to record Colette Reyes' statement, they did not expect things to unfold in such a strange way. After hearing the Miranda warning, a standard procedure before questioning, Colette did not respond. Instead, she began chanting. Not stopping there, she suddenly took off her clothes in front of the investigators. They quickly restrained her, but by that point, the interrogation was almost impossible to continue. She was no longer a viable subject to provide a valid statement. However, the police still had another important witness, Gabrielle Reyes, Colette's daughter. When asked about the events of that night, Gabrielle confirmed her aunt's testimony. Her parents had separated about a month earlier. In October 2009, Arthur and Gabrielle moved out of the house. On the night of the shooting, Arthur returned to gather the remaining items in the garage. Gabrielle recounted that she had been at a friend's house 2 blocks away. Around 9 p.m., she left her friend's house and walked home. But as she approached, a gunshot rang out. Rushing into the garage, she witnessed a horrifying scene. Her father lay in a pool of blood. Panicked, Gabrielle immediately called 911. She did not witness the confrontation between her parents firsthand, but there was one thing she was certain of. Her mother had plenty of reasons to be angry with her father. According to Gabrielle, Arthur had another woman. He had requested a divorce, and the paperwork was scheduled to be filed on Monday, just one day after he was shot. Gabrielle believed this was the reason her father chose Sunday to finish packing his belongings. So what really happened? Did Arthur pull a gun, threaten his wife, forcing Colette to shoot in self-defense? Or did the intense confrontation push Colette into an uncontrollable rage? Whatever the truth, the final decision would be left to the court. Colette Reyes was officially arrested and taken to the Tarrant County Jail on a murder charge. In early December 2009, more than a week after Colette Reyes shot and killed her estranged husband, she not only insisted that Arthur had drawn a gun on her that night, but also claimed that he had abused her for years. And in fact, the police had records to support this claim. 2 years earlier, the police had been called to their home for a domestic violence incident. At that time, Arthur and Colette had argued about their daughter, leading to a physical altercation. Arthur hit Colette, and she immediately reported it to the police. Another incident occurred in October 2009, right after Arthur and Gabrielle moved out. The family conflict escalated into a fight, resulting in both Arthur and Gabrielle being charged with minor assault. With documented records of these incidents, Colette's claim of acting in self-defense seemed plausible. But was the truth really as she claimed? Investigators found an astonishing piece of evidence, an audio recording. It turned out that Colette had secretly recorded several conversations between her and Arthur. The recording began right after Arthur arrived at the house to gather his belongings. In the conversation, Miriam, Colette's sister, tried to mediate. "Arthur, you should get back together with Colette." But Arthur immediately reacted angrily, berating Colette with harsh words. Unwilling to hear more, Miriam left the garage, but Colette remained, continuing to listen to her husband's fury. A few seconds later, a gunshot rang out. Miriam rushed back into the garage and witnessed the horrifying scene. Arthur collapsed on the floor, blood pooling around him. In the recording, Colette admitted, "I shot him." But she also stated, Arthur had a gun. However, the police only found a Glock 9mm, Colette's weapon. There was no evidence that Arthur had been holding a gun or had threatened her with a weapon. So, did Colette truly act in self-defense, or was this a murder driven by years of resentment, pain, and anger? Whatever the answer, one thing was certain: Colette would have to face justice. The prosecutors did not take long to overturn Colette's testimony. In fact, the audio recording contained no indication that Arthur had drawn a gun to threaten her before being shot. Even her defense attorneys struggled to reconcile Colette's claims with what was actually recorded. Her behavior after the incident also became more perplexing than ever. She repeatedly made bizarre statements such as, "People tell me he's dead, but I don't know if that's really true." These vague and seemingly detached remarks led investigators to consider the possibility that she had mental health issues. In fact, medical records showed that Colette had a long history of mental illness. In 1994, she had suffered a severe breakdown to the point where she believed that her colleagues, particularly lesbian women, were deliberately touching her and conspiring to infect her with AIDS. She felt persecuted at work, consumed by uncontrollable paranoia. Yet, despite these alarming signs, Colette had never sought or accepted treatment. And now, with a life lost and her future hanging in the balance before the court's judgment, the question remained: did Colette truly lose control in that fateful moment, or was she merely using her mental health issues as an excuse to escape responsibility? In November 2011, both the defense and the prosecution agreed that Colette was unfit to stand trial. The judge ordered her to be placed in a psychiatric hospital for treatment. However, just a few months later, in February 2012, her condition was deemed to have improved significantly, enough for her to return to court. Everything seemed to be proceeding smoothly, but by August 2012, as the trial date approached, the defense attorney suddenly requested a new hearing to reassess Colette's mental competency. This time, the prosecution did not agree. At the hearing in January 2013, the prosecutor called a psychologist to testify. This expert presented a completely different perspective. She asserted that Colette was faking her mental illness symptoms to evade legal responsibility. According to her assessment, Colette had deliberately exaggerated and misrepresented her condition to gain an advantage in her murder trial. Despite the defense attorney's objections, the judge ruled that Colette was competent to continue standing trial. More than 3 years after that fateful night, she could no longer escape the judgment of the law. On November 5, 2013, at the Tarrant County Courthouse in Fort Worth, Texas, Colette Reyes finally stood trial for the murder of her husband. She admitted to shooting Arthur, but the key question remained: was it an act of self-defense or a premeditated killing? In the opening statements, prosecutors argued that Colette was not just a mentally ill person, but had also intentionally faked her illness to avoid accountability. They dismissed her previous self-defense claim, emphasizing that this was a calculated murder. On the other hand, Colette's defense team abandoned their self-defense argument and instead shifted toward an insanity plea. The jury quickly heard testimony from key witnesses, Colette and Arthur's 2 daughters. Contrary to Colette's accusations that Arthur was an abuser, Gabrielle and Naomi painted a completely different picture. Naomi recalled a haunting incident when she was a child. Because she refused to go to school, her mother grabbed her by the hair, dragged her outside, and threw her into a trash can. Gabrielle, who was 21 at the time, provided an even more shocking statement. She believed her mother had planned the murder in advance. According to her, on the night of the crime, there were 3 guns in the house that Arthur owned. But after Colette lived alone, these guns disappeared, including the Glock 9, the murder weapon. This led Gabrielle to believe that her mother had premeditated her father's killing. Prosecutors also presented a compelling theory. Colette's true motive was not just family conflict, but also financial gain. For 10 years, Colette had barely worked, relying entirely on Arthur for financial support. When Arthur left her, the fear of an uncertain future became overwhelming. And as the prosecutor revealed to the jury, one of the first things Colette did after being released on bail was to file a claim for Arthur's life insurance, a sum of up to $250. Since being charged with murdering her husband, Colette Reyes had attempted to access Arthur's $250 life insurance policy, but the insurance company denied her claim. However, she did not walk away empty-handed. She had emptied all bank accounts before her arrest. During the trial, prosecutors painted a grim picture of Colette as a calculating woman willing to kill her husband for financial gain. But when it was the defense's turn, they argued that Colette's actions were not driven by cruelty or premeditation, but were the result of a long history of untreated mental illness. Colette's lawyers tried to prove that she suffered from severe mental illness, which had worsened over time. They claimed she experienced hallucinations, heard voices, and saw things that were not real. According to their argument, on the fateful night of November 22, 2009, Colette lost control of herself. She fell into a delusional state and shot Arthur during a psychotic episode. Colette's sister also testified, stating that all Colette had ever wanted was to save her marriage, but her illness had caused her to lose control. However, the question remained, was Colette truly suffering from severe mental illness, or was she merely exploiting it to evade responsibility? Her behavior in the courtroom only fueled suspicions. Her bizarre actions, from chanting during interrogations to deliberately disrupting court proceedings, had allowed her to delay the trial for 4 years. Prosecutors argued that these were not signs of mental illness, but a deliberate tactic, a tool that Colette had used to buy time and avoid sentencing. On November 13, 2013, Colette Reyes's defense team argued that she was not guilty by reason of insanity. However, after approximately 5 hours of deliberation, the jury reached its final verdict. Colette was guilty of murder. Before sentencing, Colette was given the opportunity to speak. She chose to testify on her own behalf, but her statements were incoherent and disjointed. Her strange words prompted the judge to try to intervene, while her defense team continued to insist that she was genuinely insane. However, the jury was not convinced. In the end, they sentenced Colette to 45 years in prison for murder. She would now spend her life behind bars, paying the price for what she had done. Amanda Kaur was once a single mother, struggling to make ends meet, until she met Ira, the man who gave her what seemed to be a perfect little family. But behind the facade of happiness, Amanda sensed the storm brewing within her husband. Ira seemed to be battling invisible demons, and he began to suspect that Amanda too was hiding secrets of her own. Did these suspicions drive Ira to despair, and ultimately to his own death? Or was his tragic end not just an act of desperation, but one with a helping hand? New Underwood, South Dakota, November 28, 2010. A frantic 911 call came from 27-year-old Amanda Kaur. In the call, she tearfully stated that her husband, 26-year-old Ira Kaur, had shot himself in the head. When deputies and emergency medical personnel arrived at the scene, they found Amanda waiting outside, looking dazed. She led them down to the basement, where Ira lay motionless. Inside, police discovered Ira lying on a futon, surrounded by a large pool of blood. A gunshot wound to the head had taken his life. Amanda insisted that her husband had committed suicide. She claimed he was depressed, hopeless, and saw no reason to continue living. Everything seemed straightforward, a tragic suicide with nothing suspicious. But as investigators began to verify Amanda's statements, they soon realized that the truth was far from simple. Born in 1983, Amanda Kurowski spent most of her life in the Dakotas, though she grew up in Hillsboro. A popular girl in high school, her life took an unexpected turn when she became a mother at 18. Her son was born in 2001, followed by a daughter in 2003. However, Amanda was a single mother, struggling to raise 2 children on her own. By 2005, at the age of 21, she was living in a tiny 1-bedroom apartment, trying to support her family under difficult circumstances. But in February of that year, her life changed forever when she met Ira Kaur, an Air Force pilot, at a bar in Grand Forks. Ira had grown up in a trailer park, a quiet and sensitive young man. On February 2005, he turned 21 and decided to celebrate this milestone at a bar where fate led him straight to Amanda. Just months into their relationship, Ira told his friends in the military that he and Amanda were married. No longer a single mother, Amanda now had a husband, but life remained challenging for their young family. She worked at a convenience store on the base while studying to become a hairstylist. Meanwhile, Ira's Air Force salary wasn't enough to cover their expenses, so he took on night shifts delivering pizzas to earn extra money. Despite the hardships, Ira never complained about supporting Amanda's children. In fact, he genuinely loved and cared for them as if they were his own. In 2007, Ira and his family moved to Ellsworth Air Force Base near Rapid City. Despite being busy with their new life, he continued his education and graduated with a bachelor's degree in 2009. His job at the Officer Candidate School opened up promising career prospects, marking a significant advancement in his professional life. Once settled in Ellsworth, the couple decided to buy a house and started planning for their future. After nearly 5 years together, the children were already calling Ira Dad. To make this bond official, Amanda and Ira filed for adoption. A stable career, 2 growing children, and the prospect of expanding their family. It all seemed like a great accomplishment for a couple still in their 20s. However, not everything was going smoothly. Some of Ira's friends noticed that pursuing a master's degree was putting immense pressure on him. The couple had little time for each other, and they tried to rekindle their bond by going out for drinks. But by the summer of 2010, Ira had almost stopped going out, while Amanda continued. She went to the bar 2 to 3 times a week, not because of alcohol addiction, but simply to relax and socialize. At the bar, Amanda often chatted with Kim Karp, the bar owner. In one conversation, she admitted that she didn't necessarily love Ira. She knew he would take care of her and the kids, and for her, that was enough. But over time, Amanda felt that Ira was becoming increasingly emotionally needy. According to her, he often cried, seeking comfort, and was becoming more emotionally dependent on her. Was this just a sign of a troubled marriage? Or was there something deeper and more unsettling happening in their family? Tension was mounting for Ira. He worked full-time from 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. every day, while also carrying the responsibilities of being a husband and father of 2. The physical and emotional exhaustion was taking a toll on him. Amanda confided in Kim that Ira had fallen into deep depression. According to her, by September he had become so desperate that he went to the garage and attempted to hang himself. Was this a tragic warning of what was to come? Or was there something more sinister behind his despair? On November 28, 2010, a panic 911 call was made. Amanda Cower, her voice trembling, reported that she had just found her husband, Air Force pilot Ira Cower, dead in the basement. When police arrived at the scene, they found Amanda sobbing, leading them to where Ira's body lay on a futon mattress, covered with a blanket. A gunshot wound to the head had taken his life. Initially, all signs pointed to suicide. On Ira's bedside, officers found a note in which he mentioned the pressure of work weighing down on him. But one crucial detail made an officer question the situation. If Ira had shot himself, where was the gun? Amanda explained that after discovering her husband, she had picked up the gun and put it away for safety, not wanting the children to see it. She showed the police where she had placed it on top of the refrigerator, wrapped in a towel. The weapon was a Bersa, .45 caliber pistol. After confirming Ira's death, paramedics left the scene, while investigators from the sheriff's department arrived to conduct a thorough examination. And that was when they discovered something unusual. Ira hadn't been shot once but twice. Blood in Ira's hair had concealed a second gunshot wound. This immediately shattered the suicide theory that Amanda had described. No one could shoot themselves in the head twice. Ira's body was transported to the Rapid City morgue for an autopsy, while Amanda was taken to a public safety building for a formal interrogation. The investigation into Ira Cower's death had now taken a dramatic turn. It was no longer just a suicide, but a mystery filled with disturbing questions. During questioning, Amanda Cower insisted to investigators that her husband, Ira, had been struggling emotionally for a long time. She claimed he had previously attempted suicide multiple times, and this time he had succeeded. Amanda stated that she had actually heard the first gunshot. According to her, at around 7 a.m., she was lying in bed when she was startled by a loud noise coming from the basement. Worried, she went to the basement door and called down to Ira, asking what had happened. But according to her, Ira responded, "Nothing." Believing that he had simply dropped something or had gone back to sleep, Amanda continued her morning as usual. She took the children out for breakfast and went to the Ellsworth Air Force Base commissary for groceries. At approximately 12:30 p.m., when she returned home and was putting the groceries away, Amanda walked to the top of the basement stairs and called for Ira. This time he didn't respond. Sensing that something was wrong, she went downstairs and found her husband lying motionless in a pool of blood. Panicked, she pulled a blanket over him, picked up the gun, carried it upstairs, and called 911. Everything seemed logical until investigators asked one key question: where did Ira get the gun? Amanda explained that since Ira was in the Air Force, he wanted her to own a firearm for self-protection. After much persuasion, she finally agreed, and they purchased a gun registered in her name. But something didn't sit right with the investigators. What kind of man pressures his wife into buying a gun for protection, only to then use that very gun to kill himself? The following day, investigators received the medical examiner's autopsy report. It confirmed that the first shot had been to the side of Ira's head, while the second shot was in the center of his head. According to the medical examiner, the first gunshot was not immediately fatal, but it was severe enough to render Ira brain dead. The examiner was adamant Ira would not have been able to fire a second shot. Ira hadn't died by suicide. Someone had pulled the trigger again. On the morning of November 29, 2010, exactly 24 hours after Amanda Cower's frantic 911 call, news of Ira's death had spread throughout the small town of New Underwood and Ellsworth Air Force Base. But not everyone believed that Ira had taken his own life. Investigators from the Pennington County Sheriff's Department shared the same doubts, not just because Ira had been shot twice, but because of a crucial finding in the autopsy report. Ira could not have fired the second shot himself. At this point, Amanda's suicide narrative had almost completely collapsed. Investigators traced the .45 caliber pistol that had ended Ira's life and discovered that it had been purchased at a pawn shop. When questioned, Amanda claimed she had bought the gun at Ira's request. She said that her husband and their 2 children had waited outside in the car while she went inside to make the purchase. However, security camera footage from the parking lot revealed a different truth. Amanda had gone to the pawn shop alone, without Ira or the children. It didn't stop there. The shopkeeper also vividly remembered Amanda. He recalled that he had initially tried to sell her a .22 caliber pistol, but Amanda had immediately rejected it. Her words at the time were unforgettable. "I need a gun that can take down an average-sized man." As investigators left the pawn shop, they were nearly certain Amanda Cower was not the grieving widow of a suicide victim. She was a murderer. But the biggest question remained. Why did Amanda want Ira dead? That same day, the case took a shocking turn when Ira's close friend, James Mills, called the sheriff's department with a startling lead. According to Mills, Ira had long harbored suspicions he believed his wife, Amanda, was having an affair. Her alleged lover? None other than Dallas Madsen, a local ranch owner. Mills revealed that Amanda and Dallas frequently met at a bar, and their relationship seemed far more intimate than just friendship. 2 months before his death, Ira had confronted Amanda about the affair. Immediately, investigators headed to the local bar to verify the claim. The bar owner confirmed that Ira hadn't just confronted his wife, he had also directly questioned Dallas about his relationship with Amanda. But how had Dallas reacted? Was he just an unfaithful lover, or did he play a bigger role in Ira's death? And most importantly, if Ira had discovered Amanda's infidelity, was that the reason she wanted him gone? 2 days after the shooting, on November 30, the police decided to bring in Dallas Madsen for questioning. At first, Dallas denied all accusations, insisting that he was just a friend of Amanda. But when pressed, he was forced to admit the truth. He and Amanda were romantically involved. However, Dallas firmly maintained that he had nothing to do with Ira's death and had no knowledge of what happened that night. The police set Dallas aside and turned their attention back to Amanda. Immediately after questioning Dallas, investigators confronted Amanda Cower. When they informed her that Dallas had cooperated with authorities, she began to panic. She became flustered, confused, and visibly anxious. Finally, she decided to confess. According to Amanda, Ira had fired the first shot himself. When she came downstairs, he was still alive. As she turned to call 911, Ira stopped her and begged her to end his suffering. The police were immediately skeptical. With his first gunshot wound, Ira wouldn't have been conscious enough to speak, let alone plead for Amanda to kill him. Investigators continued pressing her. When caught in a lie, Amanda quickly changed her story again. This time, she claimed that Ira was holding the gun when she entered the basement. She tried to wrestle it away from him, and during the struggle, the gun accidentally went off. But the police didn't believe her. Ira's wounds didn't match a struggle for the gun. Cornered, Amanda finally admitted the truth. She had murdered her husband. The police immediately arrested Amanda Cower, charging her with first-degree murder. On June 7, 2011, 28-year-old Amanda Cower walked into a South Dakota courtroom to face charges for killing her husband. Since the beginning of the investigation, Amanda had changed her story multiple times. First statement: she claimed she found her husband dead when she returned home. Second statement: she confessed to helping him die after a failed suicide attempt. Third statement: she insisted she accidentally shot Ira while trying to stop him from taking his own life. Final story: she described a struggle for the gun, saying that Ira was gravely wounded after the first shot and begged her to end his suffering. She reluctantly fired the second shot, but the police didn't believe any of her stories. Ira's injuries proved he couldn't have pleaded for anything after the first shot. Then came the most damning evidence. Amanda's internet search history revealed a chilling truth. She had researched firearms, comparing different calibers .22.40.45, knowing that a .22 caliber gun wasn't powerful enough to kill someone with a single shot. She specifically chose a .45 caliber pistol, a gun strong enough to ensure an instant, fatal outcome. On the morning of November 28, 2010, while the small town of New Underwood was still enveloped in tranquility, a silent tragedy unfolded in the basement of Amanda Cower's home. Just hours before the shooting, Amanda accessed two websites with chilling content: how to shoot someone in the head for an instant kill. She then walked down to the basement, aimed directly at her husband, Ira Cower, and pulled the trigger. However, the first shot did not kill Ira immediately. Amanda went upstairs as if nothing had happened and continued preparing breakfast for her children. Her plan was clear: wait for Ira to bleed to death while going about her daily routine. But there was one thing Amanda did not anticipate. Ira was still alive when she returned home in the afternoon. Seeing him barely clinging to life, she went back online searching for answers. Why hadn't he died yet? At that moment, Amanda realized the first shot hadn't been fatal enough. Coldly, she walked down to the basement again and fired a second shot, ending Ira's life. To cover up her crime, she staged the scene as a suicide, even planting a mysterious suicide note next to his body. Prosecutors feared that Amanda's fabricated suicide scenario might sway the jury. To prevent this, they offered her a plea deal. If she admitted guilt, her charge would be reduced to first-degree manslaughter, carrying a maximum sentence of 65 years, instead of facing life imprisonment for first-degree murder. On June 7, 2011, Amanda entered the South Dakota courtroom. Before the judge, she pleaded guilty but still clung to her false narrative, insisting that the first shot was accidental during a struggle. She admitted to firing the second shot, but claimed it was to end her husband's suffering. Prosecutors were frustrated by this half-hearted confession. They approached the judge with an unusual request. If the judge agreed, they were prepared to take her to trial for first-degree murder. On September 19, 2011, the South Dakota courtroom was tenser than ever. After hours of intense arguments, both sides fought to present their strongest cases. But there was a major issue. There wasn't enough concrete evidence to convict Amanda Cower of first-degree murder, meaning it could not be definitively proven that she had premeditated her husband's killing. In the end, the judge issued the verdict. Amanda was sentenced to over 32 years in prison before becoming eligible for parole. While it wasn't the harshest possible sentence, Ira Cower's family and friends felt satisfied. Justice had been served, but was it enough? New York City, morning of November 11, 2006. The clock struck 6:15 when Donna Cobb, 38 years old, called the emergency 911 hotline from her apartment in Harlem. Her voice was urgent, panicked. "My husband needs an ambulance," Donna told the dispatcher. As a nursing assistant at Harlem Hospital Center, Donna understood the severity of the situation. She gasped for breath, trying to explain. "I fought with my husband, Kevin Calm, 39 years old. I hit him with something. I don't know if he's breathing. His heart is still beating, but I call him and he's not responding." The dispatcher asked, "What did you hit him with?" Donna hesitated for a moment before replying, "A small elephant, a ceramic elephant." What seemed like a harmless blow had left Kevin motionless on the floor, setting off an investigation filled with surprises and untold secrets. As the ambulance raced to the scene, Donna, relying on her medical training, did everything she could to help Kevin. She knelt beside him, desperately trying to maintain his breathing. When the EMTs finally arrived, they quickly took over CPR from Donna and immediately used a defibrillator. Flashing lights reflected off the walls as they lifted Kevin onto the stretcher, rushing him down the stairs to the ambulance. No one could be sure if he would survive. Amid the blaring sirens echoing through the cold morning air, the police turned to Donna for answers. But as they looked at her, they realized she wasn't much better off than her husband. Donna trembled, her gaze empty, as if she had just endured a never-ending nightmare. Donna Brown was born in 1968 in Georgia, but her heart always belonged to Harlem, where she considered her true home. As a teenager, Donna possessed striking beauty, drawing attention wherever she went. However, her life took an unexpected turn in her final year of high school when she discovered she was pregnant. After giving birth, Donna refused to let it hinder her future. Determined to succeed, she enrolled in the Advanced Vocational Academy. Shortly after graduating, she began working as a certified nursing assistant. Hardworking, dedicated, and always full of energy, Donna not only earned the respect of her colleagues but also became a beloved figure among patients. Yet, despite her success at work, her personal life was plagued with bad relationships. By 1992, at the age of 23, Donna was already a single mother of 4, bearing the full responsibility of raising them with pride. It was during this time, when she was solely focused on her family and career, that Kevin Cobb, a 24-year-old man, stepped into her life, determined to win her attention at all costs. Kevin Cobb, a young man from the Bronx, first met Donna in 1992 while standing on a street corner in Harlem. That day, Donna was rushing to pick up her daughter, but Kevin wasn't about to let the opportunity slip away. He tried to strike up a conversation, even though Donna, a busy mother of 4, clearly had no time to stop. However, Kevin's persistence was undeniable. He followed her for 10 blocks, chatting nonstop, and in the end, he won her over. Kevin gave his heart entirely to Donna, and his love made her more willing to embrace the relationship. A year later, in 1993, Kevin moved in with Donna. But from there, harsh reality began to set in. Kevin was unemployed, meaning Donna had to shoulder the financial burden for the entire family alone. In 1998, they welcomed a set of twins, the embodiment of their love. At this point, their small home became more cramped than ever with 6 children. Donna, with a modest salary as a nursing assistant, struggled to provide for the whole family. She hoped Kevin would help by spending time with the children or assisting with their schoolwork. But instead, he was often out all night and slept through the day. A creeping sense of unease began to settle in Donna, and she started to suspect Kevin was involved with drugs. Her fears were soon confirmed. One afternoon, Donna found undeniable evidence. When she confronted Kevin, he tried to justify himself, promising to quit and find a job to support the family. But these were empty words. His addiction worsened, and by 2001, Kevin was arrested and sentenced to 2 years in prison for drug use. At first, Donna felt relieved that Kevin was out of her life, but distance didn't cool their feelings for each other. From behind bars, Kevin kept in touch with her, and once again, Donna couldn't let go. By 2003, shortly after his release, they decided to get married, believing it would be a fresh start for both of them. Life seemed to be on the right track until tragedy struck. New York City, early morning of November 11, 2006. At 6:30 am on a Saturday, ambulance sirens wailed through the streets of Harlem as NYPD officers and paramedics rushed to a small apartment. Inside, Donna Cobb was in a state of panic, kneeling over her unconscious husband, Kevin, who lay on the floor with a severe chest wound, blood pooling around him. As paramedics took over CPR, police pulled Donna aside to understand what had happened. She stammered, her voice choked with fear. According to Donna's statement that morning, she had been sleeping in her daughter's bed when Kevin suddenly attacked her. He jumped on me. I panicked and ran to the living room, but he chased me, pinned me down, stomped on me, and strangled me until I couldn't breathe. In a desperate struggle, Donna grabbed the first thing within reach, a porcelain elephant statue, and struck Kevin hard on the head. For a brief moment, she managed to turn the tables, but as Kevin collapsed, motionless, blood quickly seeped through his shirt. The police were skeptical of Donna's story. There were no witnesses to back up her claims. Only she and Kevin had been in that room. So far, all they had to go on was Donna's version of events. But why would Kevin try to kill her? How had a couple that reconciled after prison taken such a terrible turn? Donna told the police that in the early years, after Kevin was released from prison in 2003, he had genuinely changed. He spent time with the family, went to church, and tried to be a good husband and father. But that peace only lasted 2 years. After that, Kevin relapsed, and this time, things got worse. Donna claimed that the amount of drugs he used was more than before, and with that came terrifying paranoia. He began suspecting her of infidelity, even though Donna insisted there was no one else. But no matter how much she tried to explain, Kevin refused to believe her. His addiction deepened, and with it came his jealous rage. Kevin started controlling me, Donna said, and his jealousy often ended in violence. But if Kevin was truly abusing her, why didn't Donna leave? The police asked this question, and her answer left them in silence. "I stayed for the children," she said. Donna endured the abuse, hid the bruises, and tolerated the fights just to keep the family together. And then, that night happened. Donna recounted that the night before, they had thrown a birthday party for Kevin's cousin. The children were sent to spend the night with relatives, and at first the party was enjoyable. But soon after, a fight broke out between Kevin's cousin and his brother. When it was over, Kevin was the one who had lost. Angry and humiliated, he kicked everyone out and then left, seemingly to find drugs. Donna didn't know where he had been all night. She slept in her daughter's bed and only woke up when Kevin returned around 6 a.m. He had been drinking. Before she could react, Kevin's fury exploded. He jumped on me, hit me, and strangled me. When the police examined her face and neck, they found visible scratches and bruises, as if her story was true. But then, the investigation took a shocking turn when they searched the apartment. The discovery made them question everything. Why hadn't Donna mentioned stabbing Kevin? By late morning on November 11, 2006, Donna Cobb, 38, sat in the interrogation room of the police station. The officers informed her that Kevin had died. Despite everything she had just told them about the abuse she had suffered at the hands of her late husband, she was still in shock and disbelief at the news. But Kevin's death wasn't the only thing that left Donna horrified. The police were beginning to suspect her. While investigating Kevin's background, they confirmed that he had served time for drug offenses, but there was no record of him ever being violent. What was even more alarming was that when investigators searched the couple's apartment, they found signs that someone had attempted to clean up the crime scene. But the most shocking discovery was a small yet haunting object, a simple butter knife covered in blood. Donna had never mentioned stabbing Kevin. When confronted with the evidence, she denied trying to clean the scene. But the police knew one thing for certain: blood had been wiped away. Someone had tried to hide something. And then finally Donna admitted that she had stabbed Kevin. Now, with Kevin dead, all the police had was Donna's account of what really happened on that fateful morning. When Kevin returned home at around 6 a.m. that morning, The children were not home. He lost control. Kevin punched Donna and pulled her hair. After a struggle, she managed to break free from his grip, but she only made it as far as the living room. Kevin quickly caught up and tackled her to the ground. In a panic, Donna tried to turn over and grabbed a porcelain elephant figurine from the floor. She smashed it against Kevin's face, causing him to stumble for a brief moment, just enough time for her to escape again. But only seconds later, Kevin caught her once more in the bedroom. He beat her relentlessly, then tried to strangle her until she couldn't breathe. In a desperate moment, fighting for her life, Donna frantically searched for anything that could help her defend herself. Her hand landed on a knife. Without thinking, she plunged it into Kevin's chest. As she freed herself from his grip and saw the blood pouring out, Donna realized how badly Kevin was wounded. She immediately called 911 and tried to administer first aid. But when the paramedics arrived on the scene, along with the police, Donna lied. She didn't mention the knife. And it was this dishonesty that put the police in a difficult position. Was anything, Donna said, actually true? When someone is caught lying, all of their statements become questionable. In the end, after finishing their interrogation, the police calmly placed Donna in handcuffs. She was charged with second-degree murder, and for a mother of 6, this charge could mean an incredibly harsh sentence. In 2010, nearly 4 years had passed since Donna Cobb admitted to stabbing her husband Kevin. Yet, she still had not had her day in court. The New York District Attorney's Office did not seem in a hurry to prosecute the 42-year-old mother who was raising 6 children alone. On the other hand, the victim, Kevin, was a drug addict, a former convict, and had a history of doing truly terrible things. But that did not mean the prosecution was planning to drop the case. From the day she was arrested on a second-degree murder charge, Donna had lived in limbo for 4 years, and the biggest nightmare she faced was that if convicted, she could be sentenced to life in prison. On September 27, the trial of Donna Cobb officially began. Prosecutors argued that Donna was not a victim of domestic abuse as she claimed. They asserted that most of her allegations about Kevin abusing her were fabricated after the fact to cover up the truth about what she had done. According to Donna's initial statement to the police, she had stabbed Kevin with the knife while he was on top of her. However, when the medical examiner was called to testify, he stated that the autopsy results told a completely different story. Evidence showed that the blade had penetrated Kevin's chest about 3 inches deep, a wound that could not have been caused by a weak thrust. Notably, it was only a butter knife, meaning it would have required significant force to cut through like that. To further support this argument, the prosecution called a crime scene investigator. He pointed out that, contrary to Donna's claims, the blood pattern on the bed indicated that Kevin had not been on top of her when he was stabbed. In fact, he believed Donna had stabbed Kevin while he was lying on his back in bed, possibly while he was asleep. If this evidence was not compelling enough, the prosecution presented another shocking detail. Donna had not called 911 immediately. According to phone records, the first person Donna contacted while her husband was bleeding on the floor was not emergency services, it was her mother. It took another 13 minutes before Donna finally dialed 911, an amount of time that could have made the difference between life and death. When defending herself, Donna firmly denied attacking Kevin while he was asleep. She insisted she had not been standing over him when she stabbed him. However, she also had to admit that she had called her mother before calling emergency services. According to Donna's testimony, the reason she didn't call 911 immediately was that she didn't believe Kevin's life was in danger. After all, the wound had been inflicted with a butter knife. But when she saw that Kevin was still bleeding, she decided to get her phone to call for help. However, Donna testified that Kevin stopped her, urging her not to call. She also admitted to lying to the police out of fear. During the trial, some of Donna's 6 children testified that Kevin frequently beat her. However, the question remained, was that enough to prove that Donna had acted in self-defense? Prosecutors quickly reminded the jury that at the time Kevin was stabbed, No one else was in the apartment to witness what had actually happened. On October 12, 2010, after nearly 4 years of waiting, Donna Cobb sat in a Manhattan courtroom listening to the jury's decision. After just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered their final verdict. Donna Cobb was not guilty on all charges. The court concluded that Donna had acted reasonably to protect herself from the threat of being killed. As the verdict was announced, Donna and her children broke down in tears of joy. Her friends and supporters were also overjoyed with the outcome. Michelle Williams, the beautiful blonde girl with doll-like eyes, once captivated everyone. Greg Williams, the charming husband, seemed like a prince straight out of a fairy tale. But this was no fairy tale. A scream shattered the quiet suburban night. The door burst open, and Michelle ran outside in a panic. Neighbors startled awake. Lights flickered on in nearby houses. 911 received the call. Inside their home, Greg lay on the floor with 3 gunshot wounds. The police arrived within minutes, but it was too late. A shocking murder case, and the media swarmed like vultures hunting for news. Michelle claimed it was self-defense, an unexpected attack. But was it really, or would the police uncover enough dark secrets to bring her down? Columbus, Ohio, September 30, 1993. Michelle Williams, 23 years old, ran out of her newly rented townhouse, her bare feet pressing against the cold pavement. Her scream tore through the silent night. Neighbors jolted awake, pulling back curtains to peek outside as lights flickered on one by one. Someone broke into the house. He shot my husband. A moment of stunned silence, then chaos erupted. Someone dialed 911. Within minutes, sirens wailed across the neighborhood. First responders rushed inside and found Greg Williams slumped in the living room chair, his body covered in blood. 3 bullets, 2 piercing his chest, 1 lodged in his arm. All efforts to save him were futile. Outside, Michelle trembled, tears streaming down her face. She was so distraught that the police had to calm her down. Once she regained her composure, she described the shooter who had supposedly fled. Immediately, the entire neighborhood was locked down, and police launched a manhunt. But while officers chased a faceless suspect, something else arrived even faster: the media. Reporters crowded in front of the house, cameras pointing directly at the young widow, the woman who had just lost her husband in a brutal murder. Michelle tearfully urged the police to find the killer, and by that night, her face was everywhere on the news. But this was just the beginning of a bizarre story, one that would not only unravel Michelle's secrets, but also take a turn that no one could have predicted. Born in 1970 in Columbus, Ohio, Michelle Clayman had a peaceful childhood in a middle-class family. After graduating from high school in 1988, she chose to stay close to home and continue her education at a nearby university. But before starting college that fall, Michelle took a summer job at the Northwest Swim Club, and it was there that she met Greg Williams. Greg was 7 years older than Michelle, also a Columbus native. He was a cheerful, sociable guy and an outstanding swimmer. After graduating high school in 1981, instead of going straight to college, Greg took a different path. He joined the U.S. Air Force, where he served for 4 years. After his service, he returned home to pursue a degree in accounting at Ohio State University and resumed his passion for swimming, becoming a coach at the Northwest Swim Club. One summer day in 1988, as the golden sunlight reflected off the clear blue pool, Greg saw Michelle for the first time. He was immediately drawn to her delicate beauty and her large, doll-like eyes. Before long, they started dating. Their relationship was steady, not overly passionate, but enduring over time. After graduating, Michelle and Greg decided to start a new life in Denver, Colorado. Their wedding took place in April 1992, and Michelle, a 21-year-old bride, radiated happiness on her big day. 8 months later, life in Denver was no longer as exciting as it once seemed. Michelle started feeling homesick. The unfamiliarity of a new city made her feel lost. It didn't take long for Michelle to convince Greg to move back to Columbus. And as always, Greg was willing to do anything to make his wife happy. On September 29, 1993, as Greg and Michelle parked their moving truck outside their newly rented townhouse, it seemed like everything was set for a happy homecoming after 18 months in Denver. But in the end, their story turned into a tragedy. On the afternoon of September 30, 1993, Columbus, Ohio police launched a manhunt for the person who shot Greg Williams. The only witness was Michelle Williams, the victim's distraught wife. Michelle told the police that a white man wearing a tool belt had broken into their home. At the time, she was in the kitchen, while Greg was taking a nap on the living room couch. The intruder suddenly stormed in, said nothing, pulled out a gun, and fired 3 shots. Greg collapsed immediately. As the man fled through the back door, Michelle ran to the front, screaming hysterically, prompting neighbors to call 911. Within minutes, police officers and paramedics arrived. While doctors fought to save Greg's life, the hunt for the shooter began. But there was one major problem. No one in the neighborhood had seen this stranger. The only hope the police had now was Michelle. They took her to the Central Police Station for a detailed statement. In the interrogation room, Michelle recounted her story. At first, she thought it was a robbery. But if it was a robbery, why didn't he take anything? Michelle then offered another theory. Perhaps Greg had been murdered over debt. He had borrowed $1,000 from a high-interest lender to bet on football a few years ago. The police were skeptical. Would such a small debt from years ago be a strong enough motive for such a bold murder? Moreover, one thing stood out to the investigators. Michelle had no injuries at all, not a single scratch. Was she just incredibly lucky, or was there another explanation? The police decided to conduct a gunshot residue test on Michelle's hands, an important test to determine whether she had fired a gun. Michelle agreed immediately. But as soon as the investigator stepped out of the room for a moment, she began to panic. Her breathing grew rapid, her hands clenched tightly, and anxiety was written all over her face. Her mother, who was with her, also noticed the sudden change in her behavior. When the investigator returned, Michelle trembled and confessed, "I touched his chest." The investigators exchanged glances before calmly responding, "Don't worry, there's a difference between touching a blood-stained shirt and firing a gun." Michelle nodded, seeming somewhat reassured. Eventually, she agreed to take the gunshot residue test to confirm whether she had fired a weapon. When the test was completed, Michelle's father arrived at the police station. He walked into the interrogation room with devastating news. Greg didn't make it. Michelle froze, her face turning pale. She burst into tears, but amidst her sobs, her anxiety was evident. It wasn't just grief over losing her husband. There seemed to be something else. The police continued, questioning her. "Have you ever purchased a gun before?" Michelle hesitated, her eyes darting away. A long silence followed before she finally admitted, "Yes, I bought a gun while I was in Colorado a few months ago." She quickly added that she hadn't brought it to Columbus, claiming she had discarded it long ago. The investigators listened, taking notes, but no one was entirely convinced. Afterward, Michelle was allowed to leave, saying she would go to her parents' house to rest after the shock of losing her husband. On September 30, 1993, less than 6 hours after the horrific shooting, Michelle Williams became the center of a highly suspicious investigation. Her husband, Greg Williams, 30 years old, had been shot dead inside their home in Columbus. Initially, Michelle claimed that an intruder was responsible. But as the police began digging deeper, her story didn't quite add up. Michelle's unusual reactions during the gun residue test only heightened the detectives' suspicions. But what truly caught their attention was her strange behavior. After the interrogation, Michelle returned to the crime scene and insisted on entering the house. "I need to check on my cats," she insisted. But the police refused, and immediately Michelle became oddly agitated. Meanwhile, the crime scene search team discovered a crucial detail upstairs. In a bedroom, they found a box buried in a pile of clothes. Inside, a gun was carefully hidden in a drawstring bag. This completely contradicted Michelle's statement. She had previously claimed she discarded her gun when she left Colorado, but clearly she had not. Downstairs, the police continued their search and found Michelle's wallet in the living room. Inside the wallet, they discovered something even more suspicious than bullets. If the bullets found inside matched the ones that killed Greg, the police would have the murder weapon in their hands, and all clues would point to Michelle. But that wasn't the biggest shock. When searching her wallet, they also found a love letter addressed to a mysterious man in Colorado. What Michelle wrote in the letter seemed like a veiled confession. If its contents were true, it suggested that Michelle may have been having an affair. Michelle's letter was an aspect that needed to be explored. Was the boyfriend in Colorado an accomplice? The police knew they had to go to Colorado to interview this man. On October 3, just 3 days after Greg Williams' murder, investigators from Columbus flew to Colorado in search of answers. The mysterious man to whom Michelle had sent the love letter was genuinely shocked to learn that Greg was dead. But what surprised him even more was the revelation that Michelle had feelings for him. "We only flirted a little, but I never thought she was in love with me. So why did Michelle create such a complicated love story in her head?" He stated that Michelle had once confided in him that she was unhappy in her marriage with Greg. But if that unhappiness was a motive for murder, he had no idea. Investigators carefully observed his reactions. There were no signs of lying, no attempt at concealment. Ultimately, they ruled him out as a suspect, but the trip to Colorado was not entirely fruitless. They visited a gun store where Michelle had claimed she had discarded her gun long ago. The store owner positively identified Michelle as the person who had purchased the gun, contradicting her previous statement. However, the most crucial discovery came from Greg's former employers in Denver. When the police informed them of his death, they received a shocking piece of information. Greg had a life insurance policy worth $210. Not only that, but during his time at his former company, he had an additional insurance policy worth $100. The notable detail was that Greg had left the company some time ago, but the policy remained active only until the very last day of that month. Greg was murdered on September 30, just hours before the insurance policy expired. And most importantly, Michelle Williams was the sole beneficiary. On October 6, 1993, the investigation reached a critical turning point when the crime lab sent back the ballistic test results. The gun found in the house was the very weapon that killed Greg Williams. And the most shocking detail? Michelle had purchased that gun just 2 weeks before the murder. That same day, Columbus police arrived at the doorstep of Michelle's parents' home with an arrest warrant. Before they could even knock, a crowd of reporters had already swarmed the front yard, ready to capture the dramatic moment. Inside the house, investigators confronted Michelle and her family. "Michelle Williams, you are under arrest for the murder of your husband." A heavy silence filled the room. No tears, no resistance. Michelle remained eerily indifferent. But just seconds later, she fainted into the arms of a patrol officer. The police quickly escorted Michelle to the patrol car, pushing through a sea of cameras and flashing lights. Greg Williams' family was in complete shock. They had believed Michelle to be a loving wife. But by October 15, when the grand jury officially indicted Michelle for first-degree murder, the truth began to emerge. The evidence against Michelle was overwhelming. Yet despite everything, she remained steadfast in her innocence, determined to take the case to trial. In November 1993, as police and prosecutors continued to build their case, they received an unexpected tip from Michelle's former employer in Colorado. He called to report that Michelle's old company had just received a strange package, a product catalog from a company called Paladin Press. Investigators immediately looked into it and uncovered a chilling truth. Michelle Williams had ordered a book from Paladin Press months before Greg's murder. The title of the book? Hitman, a technical manual for independent contractors, a step-by-step guide on how to commit the perfect murder. In other words, Michelle had been planning to kill her husband for a long time. By early 1994, as the trial date approached, Michelle's defense team began to panic. They reached out to the prosecution with a desperate proposal. Michelle would plead guilty to manslaughter. But there was a problem. The sentence for manslaughter ranged from only 7 to 25 years. Greg's family was outraged. They could not accept the possibility that this cold-blooded killer might walk free after just a few years in prison. Ultimately, the prosecution countered with an offer, not first-degree murder with a life sentence, but second-degree murder with a minimum of 20 years behind bars. Now, the final decision was in Greg's family's hands. Accept the deal for a sentence of 15 years to life, or take the risk, reject the plea bargain, and let a jury decide Michelle's fate. The big question remained, were they willing to take Michelle to trial and ensure full justice was served? By the spring of 1994, Michelle Williams' legal team faced an inescapable reality. With the overwhelming amount of evidence collected by prosecutors, there was no doubt if the case went to trial, Michelle, then 24 years old, would almost certainly be convicted of murdering her husband. Understanding this, her lawyers decided to approach the prosecution with a plea deal. Michelle would plead guilty to murder in exchange for a sentence of 15 years to life. Greg's family, though furious over her crime, agreed to the deal to avoid a prolonged and painful trial. On May 12, 1994, Michelle Williams officially pleaded guilty. After months of avoiding the victim's family, she finally had the chance to apologize. But what stood out was that Michelle did not beg for forgiveness, nor did she express deep remorse. She simply accepted her guilt, her sentence, and the judgment passed upon her. More than 20 years later, Greg's family still struggles to understand how Michelle could have so heartlessly shot her sleeping husband and then calmly staged a crime scene. How could a woman who seemed gentle, intelligent, and full of promise commit such a cold and ruthless act? It remains an unanswered question, a tragedy that Greg's loved ones will carry in their hearts forever.